Yeah, for me, I think the most important thing is to fall in love with some type of activity. And I think when you organically fall in love with something, whether it's learning Spanish or learning how to play soccer, I think people notice. People feel that true passion that you have for it. So if you want to use your passions for good, I would recommend to authentically fall in love with whatever it is that you're passionate about, and people will take notice, and it will inspire them to pursue their own passions as well.
Welcome to Champion This with Briana, Salvatore, Dueck, and Chelsea Poppens, where we share the incredible stories of athletes and entertainers who are using their platforms to create positive change in the world and the communities they live in.
Today we have Tommy Thompson on the podcast. Tommy Thompson is a professional soccer player in the MLS. He's had an incredible career with the San Jose Earthquakes, where he was named one of the top 50 players in San Jose Earthquakes history. He's played over 200 matches for the Earthquakes across all competitions as of 2025. He's also super passionate about giving back to the community and even received the Humanitarian of the Year award for the MLS in 2017. A fun fact, Tommy is also fluent in Spanish and he is a world traveler. Welcome to the podcast, Tommy.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm excited to be on.
Well, we're excited to hear your story and kind of do a little deep dive in what you're doing now. I mean, you're tuning in from Tahoe, so I'm pretty jealous.
Yeah, it's
I'm
been
sure it's
nice
better
to
weather
watch.
than here in Iowa.
Yeah,
Oh, Iowa's
Iowa.
where you're at right now?
Yeah. It's been negative degrees except for this week. And this week it's like 40, 50. And I'm like, it's summer. Yeah. But we love to kick off the podcast to give our listeners a little bit of background on you. And we want to take it back to the beginning of your journey with soccer. We know you grew up in a soccer household. Your dad, Greg Thompson, as a former professional soccer player and member of the U.S. men's national team. Obviously, you have your own career and your resume and your own journey. But take us back to the moment you fell in love with soccer and how it became such an ingrained piece of you.
Yeah, so it all started from my dad. I was raised in a soccer household, as you mentioned. I had two older brothers that played and a younger sister as well. And ever since we could walk, my dad always had like little miniature soccer balls around the house. So we just grew up kicking balls in the goal before we even were in preschool. And he did a great job of creating a safe environment where we all fell in love with it in our own way. He was never pushing us too hard. He just shared his love for the game with us, and it was contagious. You know, like on weekends, he'd be watching the English Premier League um, in the morning. So when we would come down for breakfast, the game would be on, and without telling us to come sit down and watch, we just saw how much he liked it, and that caused us to become interested in teams like Manchester United or Arsenal, and that's where we started to dream big. And I ended up, having the opportunity to have him as my coach for basically my entire youth soccer career. I was the lucky sibling that had him coach me for the longest time. So ever since under 9 soccer, he was there for me, basically raising me on the soccer field. He would run different camps in the Sacramento area as well as in Minnesota, where he would create a fun community of people where we young players that we would all compete. And being raised in that environment, I think was good for me to organically fall in love with the game. So I give him a ton of credit. There's no way I'd be here without my dad coaching me all throughout my childhood and sharing his love for the game with me before I could even talk, basically.
That's
Yeah.
no, that's beautiful. But my experience of my parents coaching me was not that. Did you have any moments where you wished your parents weren't, or your dad wasn't your coach?
No, actually, it's funny with our siblings. The only issues that arose from my dad's coaching is when he wasn't coaching us. So he had limited time, so he wasn't able to coach all of us separately. So there's a couple years where my older brothers didn't have the opportunity to be on the team that he was coaching, and that was when issues would arise because we wouldn't get like because we considered him one of the best coaches in the area, and so the only time I would say we were frustrated is when he wasn't running the sessions for us. But I would say the oldest brother got the shortest stick on that front because I ended up playing up a year, so I would play because all of my siblings are a year apart. We all went to high school at the same time.
Wow.
Junior, sophomore,
just
freshman.
churning out athletes.
Yeah, your mom is the MVP for that. That's crazy.
Yeah, and so I would join in with my middle brother's team, right? And so my dad would coach. I would be playing a year up with the middle brother, and so we would both be training with him. And then my dad coached my team as well, which was for my age group. So I would have him for 2 separate sessions, and then my oldest brother got the short end of the stick where he was with a different team, unfortunately. So I would say that was the only time that issues arose was when my dad wasn't coaching us.
Yeah. Well, he definitely did something right because y'all are some prodigy soccer kids to come out of that household. And the fact that you're like love to play for your dad and you guys are really fighting over that speaks to like his character and honestly goals. Like I don't have kids yet, but I'm like, I hope to be the kind of parent where my kids feel inspired and are getting great coaching, but also like love to be coached by me. If one day I end up like coaching kids in NJB or whatever, let's see.
Yeah, I'm not sure how he did it because obviously there's countless stories of athletes getting burned out from having parents grind them through the what it takes to become a D1 player, a professional player. But he just found that perfect balance of keeping it competitive and keeping it fun, and it worked out because all of us ended up going pro. I went pro at 18. The middle brother was a 3-time All-American at Indiana. And so he went pro after that. And then the oldest brother was he was the captain at Stanford and helped them win their first national championship back in 2015. So he just created that environment where we competed amongst each other, and it wasn't anything unhealthy or none of us got burned out. We just wanted to compete, and it served all of us in different ways.
Totally. You mentioned your brother played at University of Indiana as well. Did you ever overlap with him or were you there at different times?
Yeah, so there's a funny story when it came to the recruitment process was hilarious. Like when I was in 8th grade, my brother was a freshman and then the oldest brother was a sophomore, and trying to figure out where we wanted to go to school, like if we were going to do a package deal with all 3 of us or if it was just going to be me and the middle brother. Because me and the middle brother played the most together, so we were probably the closest as far as like our playing chemistry went. But we also liked playing with the oldest brother as well because we were all in different positions. It was like a defensive mid, an attacking mid, and a forward.
So fun.
So there was an opportunity to potentially have all 3 of us at the same college at the same time, and UCSB was interested early on. Like when I was in 8th grade, they were talking to my brother who was a sophomore. And so we thought about that, but we ended up the oldest brother ended up wanting to go to a school for academics and then also soccer. But academics was the priority. Stanford's soccer program at that time wasn't at the level that me and the middle brother wanted to play at. But they ended up obviously being great. He was the only one that ended up winning a national championship, but he went to school for academics and then he ended up winning a national championship. That's a different story. But me and the middle brother, I was always going to go wherever he wanted to go. Because he coaches now at Indiana. He was coaching at Ohio State before. So even when he was 15 or 16 years old, he had that coach's mind. And I trusted him. I loved playing with him. So I was just going to listen to whatever he said. And I still remember, it's over 10 years ago now, but he was in the coach's office at Stanford. And my brother had committed to go there already, the oldest one. And so now it's me and the middle brother in the office at Stanford. and there was a conversation being had between the middle brother and the head coach at Stanford, and they were talking to each other. And Tanner just left that meeting and said, "We're not going here. We're going to Indiana." And so we both went to Indiana
Wow.
together.
He knew.
Yeah, we went to Indiana together. I ended up graduating high school a year early, so we both went there as freshmen together.
Wow.
That's crazy. What's wild about that too, kind of to continue on with your story, you play for University of Indiana, you're Big Ten Freshman of the Year. You score 5 goals in 12 matches, which is insane. And then before you can even finish freshman year of college, you are offered a position to play for the Earthquakes as their first homegrown player on January 22nd of 2024. So that's, first of all, just super, super impressive. But talk to us about kind of what was that leap like from college soccer, kind of amateur soccer, to all of a sudden you're on the pro scene as a rookie in your first year?
Yeah, it was a whirlwind. Because growing up in Sacramento, Sacramento Republic didn't exist back then. The Earthquakes were 2.5 hours away, playing at Buckshot Stadium at Santa Clara University. So the hype around soccer wasn't the same as it is now, with teams like Atlanta, Seattle making major noise in different cities across the country. So honestly, I didn't think too much about becoming a professional athlete. For me, the focus was, okay, I know I can play Division I college soccer. Where am I going to play at? And then we'll see where things go from there. But then once I graduated high school a year early, that sped it up. We're now, I'm 17 in preseason with Indiana University. I'm like, okay, things are moving quicker than I expected. And then things went well quickly there. And all of a sudden, we win the Big Ten tournament, and agents are calling, and there's a real possibility of me going either homegrown for the Earthquakes or Generation Adidas, which is where Adidas picks out some of the best players in college soccer, signs them to a contract, and then they get drafted through the normal draft process. But that was bizarre because I was supposed to be a senior in high school. All the friends that I grew up with were going to senior ball and, doing senior sunrise and all these different activities. So it was really a whirlwind that I didn't see coming. But, I was excited, obviously, but it was almost like, it was almost like ignorance was bliss in that situation where things were happening so fast. I didn't even have time to fully think about it. And, I was going back and forth about whether I wanted to go back to Indiana or not. But we're in contract negotiations with the Earthquakes, and then it ended up being too good of an opportunity to pass up. So and again, back to my brother kind of guiding me through all of this. Initially, I was talking to him, and it was like, we want to make sure we play together at Indiana, and if the contract isn't the right situation for you, maybe it's better for you to continue your development. You're only 18 years old. You need to maybe keep getting better before you enter the pros. But then eventually, after the Earthquakes kept coming back throughout the negotiations, I remember he told me, he's like, "You've got to go. This is too good of an opportunity. You got to take it." And so he pushed me forward in that regard, which was funny. And so the next thing you know, my high school friends are still in Sacramento, going to Granite Bay High School, but I'm living with 2 Earthquakes teammates in San Jose. One of them was 27 and the other was 34, and I was 18. So life changed pretty quick, but it all worked out in the end.
What was there any specific difference in play and level? Then, was it kind of a shock to step into the elite level of play, or did it come pretty smoothly for you?
Yeah, no, it definitely was a shock. Yeah, the level was much higher. It's faster. People are stronger. Everyone is skilled. That was a big jump for me. I had played with the Earthquakes first team periodically when I was a junior and a sophomore in high school, so I got exposed to that level. But it was just a couple times, a couple trainings, a couple different times. So once I was immersed in the environment, I started to realize how good these professionals really were. And physically, I had a long way to go. I was 145 pounds, and freshly 18 years old. So there was a lot to learn. But I ended up figuring it out. Basically, I put on 10, 15 pounds of muscle, and then all of a sudden I was like, okay, now I can operate at this.
Yeah, get in the weight room.
Yeah, because for me,
Yeah.
growing up, I was always like a skilled player that was also quick over short distances, and so I never needed uh, muscle. But then in the pros, people they're so good about like initiating contact, and they're so fast. You can't just dance away from them, and so I ended up needing to get like that shell of muscle to allow me to mix it up with the guys at that level.
Yeah, I'd be interested to hear a little bit how like you're 17 with all those older players. Like, what did that leadership look like? Because I know when I got drafted into the WNBA, there was like, I was intimidated. Had a lot of anxiety and fears and whatever as I stepped into that space, like with Sue Bird, and maybe not even feeling like I belonged quite yet, but we had good leaders that eventually like made me feel comfortable in my own talents and skills. And that leadership looks different. What did that leadership look like for you?
Yeah, it was a challenge. The league at that point in 2014 was very different than it is now. There's something called a homegrown signing, which is where they sign young players from the academy into the first team contract where they can get exposed to that first team mold. And the Earthquakes now have made, I don't know, maybe 15 homegrown signings or 20 homegrown signings over the past 10, 11 years. But the thing for me was that I was the first one ever. And so the Earthquakes homegrown signings now in the locker room have a couple people around their age where they're going through this experience together. They're 15, 16, 19 years old. You have that familiarity with people that are in similar walks of life as you. But because I was the first one in 2014, I was stepping into a locker room where the average age was 28 years old. And locker rooms in MLS now look very different. Now the league's gone in a completely different direction where it's much younger. And so that's a great environment for kids to grow, learn from the older players, but then also hang out with the younger players in the locker room without having to feel isolated. But for me, there was a big isolation component, but I think it served me over the long term. I had to grow up quick, and I think it was really good for me. But there's no doubt that those first couple of years were a challenge. Going from hanging out with my high school friends in June, and then hanging out with a college team who I thought was old in August, to then now hanging out with 34-year-old roommate in January. It was a crazy progression, but at the end of the day, it was too good of an opportunity, so I had to find my way.
Totally, that's wild.
And
Watching your friends go to prom.
Both those roommates, by the way, were Jamaican. So it was a 27-year-old Jamaican and a 34-year-old Jamaican. So
I love this.
There's a lot of new experiences for me, but it was good.
That's amazing. But one of my favorite things about you, Tommy, is you are like such a great people person, and you can connect with anyone, which I think has made you such an incredible teammate and allowed you to be one of those top 50 players for the Earthquakes. So I'm sure you adapted well and quickly made those guys like two of your boys.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I think that's where a lot of it came from. Was I was in unique social situations starting at 18 years old, and different coaches came into the Earthquakes organization and brought in different people from all over the world. There was a Central American Caribbean influence early on, and then it went to European influence, and then it went to South American influence. So I was constantly being exposed to new groups of people, and there's no doubt it was challenging at times. It could be a bit uncomfortable when the first language in the locker room is Spanish, but I think it really helped expand my horizon or expand my scope of the world and my ability to connect with people.
Totally. Yeah. And I think speaking of some of those cool, unique situations, like you also have played soccer on a global scale around the world. You were a member of the US under 20 national team in 2014 to 15. A couple stats from that time where you earned 21 caps, scored 3 goals and you also played throughout your career a lot of international friendlies with the Quakes. Talk to us about kind of your experience playing soccer on the global scale. How has this changed your perspective on the game? And yeah, even like life more largely.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think that period with the under 20 national team, like, it just showed me the world, and I think I needed that. Being from Sacramento, I hadn't even been out of the country, and so start like traveling across the world to play soccer taught me like a new understanding of how true it is that the soccer really is the world's game. Um, and in order to qualify for that under 20 World Cup, we needed to go to Jamaica, and so that's where you play against North American teams, Central American teams to earn your spot, like earn your right to play in that World Cup. And so that was an incredible experience. Playing against teams like Guatemala, Jamaica. We played them on their home turf. It was awesome. El Salvador too. It was cool. I remember in preparation for that qualification period, we went to Honduras. Um, I was probably 19 years old at the time, and then I was playing against the Honduran under 20 national team in San Pedro Sula, where we're getting escorted out of the airport with guys with AK-47s in a pickup truck. And that's
Wow.
Yeah, I was gonna say, isn't Honduras like you're not supposed to go there like anymore?
It's interesting, but like that exposure, because I was visiting my brother at Indiana. It was the MLS off season, and so I was training at Indiana to stay sharp for this camp in Honduras. And I took a flight out of Indianapolis, went to Chicago, and then flew from Chicago to San Pedro Sula. And that was a new exposure, going from Bloomington, Indiana to now inside of the San Pedro Sula airport. You have your luggage, and then all of a sudden you see men in pickup trucks with AK-47s. It's exposed. That's the reality. That's where some of these the under 20 program wants to prepare the next generation of American soccer players for what it looks like playing in Honduras or playing in Mexico or playing in El Salvador. They want you to see that so you can stay focused regardless of any of the external distractions. So that was awesome. And then we ended up qualifying. And then you have to make the World Cup roster, which was a great experience too. So we played in countries like England, Austria. We went to Spain, where we played against Russia and Canada. We actually went all the way to Spain to play Canada for some reason. But we played like Qatar and Austria, which was awesome. And then the World Cup was in New Zealand. So we flew to Australia for the pre-World Cup camp, got into New Zealand, and then had the opportunity to play against Myanmar. And we played New Zealand on their home turf. And then we played against Ukraine. And then
Wow.
in the round of 16, we beat Colombia. And then we ended up losing in PKs in the quarterfinal to Serbia, who ended up actually winning the World Cup against Brazil, the under 20 World Cup against Brazil. So that was amazing. Just starting to see, all these talented soccer players from across the world, all with the same passion, the same dream of, making it to the World Cup or making it as a soccer player in their respective countries. It was eye opening.
Yeah, that has to be an incredible experience, and definitely Australia is way better than Honduras to go to.
Yeah.
a little safer.
Right. Exactly.
But I'd love to hear what you think and your thoughts on the state of men's soccer and what it needs to do in order to be more competitive on the international stage. Do you have any thoughts around this?
Yeah, I think particularly Team USA, right? Because
Yeah, sorry.
women's Team USA is killing, and the men's team is getting a lot more competitive. But curious your thoughts.
Yeah, I think we're headed in the right direction. I think Americans, especially because the route to professional soccer is so different than the route to NBA or NFL. Americans don't realize like the sacrifices kids are making at young ages in England or Holland or Argentina or Brazil, whatever it happens to be. These kids are devoting their entire life to it as soon as they join an academy at 11 or 12 years old. And right now we are starting to adopt the European model where there's academies now in the US that and I think the Earthquakes Academy is like this. I'm not 100% sure on that, but once you join to play for a U15 or U16 academy, you actually drop out of high school, and so you become homeschooled, or not homeschooled. There's a program that you're educated like through the organization by, but it's almost like a residency program where then you're training full time and you're basically being treated as a professional athlete at that age. And so to Americans, that's scary. You're giving up your high school experience, you're potentially giving up your college experience, you're going all in on one sport, but that's what it takes to be competitive, because that's what these superstars that you see like Mbappe or Neymar, whoever else, they devoted their entire life to the game, and then that's why they are able to get the results that they want for their countries in the World Cup, because the devotion of the game starts so young, and we're starting to adopt that model. And there's good things about that, and there's bad things about that, because you're going all in on something, and anytime you do that, you could be you might make it, you might not. But I think that competitiveness and that structure that we're starting to see with because when I was growing up, there wasn't even a Seattle Academy to play for, but now there's a real pathway that is starting to mimic the European model, which I think is going to take U.S. soccer to that next level, and that's what you're starting to see with guys like Christian Pulisic, having the success that he's having. But he went to Germany when he was a teenager, and so he jumped into that European model of development, and then that's why that had a huge impact on his ability to reach his ceiling that he's reaching now. But it's a huge commitment, and honestly, Americans at times aren't comfortable with that type of devotion to a sport. Whereas like I feel like for basketball or football, there's always high school football, and then there's college football, and then you have to play for a certain amount of years before you enter the NFL draft. Or basketball, you have to go to college and be a freshman, and then you could get out, whatever it happens to be. Soccer, these guys are joining academies, and then it's all soccer from the jump. But that's what it takes to compete against the best teams in the world, because that's what they're doing.
Yeah, that's crazy. I think that it's similar for a lot of, like, I train kids in basketball, and parents will hyper focus on one sport, but it's like it is a high risk thing because kids can get burnt out, and you see different scenarios play out, whether kids just end up hating the sport or if they actually really fully commit. If you had kids, would you push them into these type of academies?
It's a great question. And that I talked to because this is a new phenomenon. I was the youngest signing, like I was the first homegrown signing and the youngest guy in the locker room at 18. A couple of years ago, we signed a guy that was 14 years old. Yeah, and he didn't play with us that first year, but now he just signed with Cruz Azul, and he's gonna have, I'm sure, a great career. Cruz Azul is a huge team in Mexico, so it paid off for him. But I imagine those conversations, a 14-year-old signing a professional contract, that's scary, because now if things don't work out, like, does he have the high school friends that we have, or does he have the college friends that we have when we had the opportunity to go through those different experiences? You're going through life with people, and those are people that are with you for the rest of your life at times. And when you step into a locker room, it's true, you have that locker room dynamic and you have relationships that you can build there, but at the end of the day, people are there to make money, and you're competing. It's a zero-sum game. You're competing with the guy across from you. And so putting a 15, 16, 17-year-old into those situations, it's intimidating. And as a guy that actually made that jump, I don't know if I would want my kid to go through that. He'd have to really love it, is what it comes down to. And I think my dad saw the love that I had for it, and I think he believed that I could handle it. But if you don't really love it, I don't recommend diving into this industry, because it can be tough.
Yeah, that's fascinating. That's crazy. So kind of to switch gears and bring it back to you a little bit, Tommy, and some of your on-court style of play. You in particular are really known for your creative footwork. You sent over to me some of your Harlem Globetrotters, like videos where you were busting out these insane moves, dribbling, throwing these passes. I mean, like soccer dribbling, and dishing out dimes to Harlem Globetrotters, like with your feet to catch these dunks in the air. But yeah, like how did you develop that style of play? And like it's very unique to you.
Yeah. So when I was probably in 7th grade or 8th grade, I started watching these Joga Bonito advertisements. I'm not sure if in the basketball world you guys ever got exposed to those, but the Brazil 2006 World Cup team had this amazing energy to it. Guys like Ronaldinho, Ronaldo, they
Yeah.
played the game with such flair,
Yeah.
and they created environments that just seemed so fun, and it seemed like guys were really happy. And so Nike did a great job of capturing the essence of that team in these advertisements. And so I would go on YouTube and look at these Joga Bonito videos, and I fell in love with that Brazilian approach to the game, which is very different than how Americans were approaching the game at that time. The U.S. men's soccer team was more known for hard work, fundamentals, and like a direct, simple approach to the game in order to compete at that level. But the Brazilians were so talented that they were able to add their own flair with the flicks and the back heels. It was fun to watch, and so I fell in love with that. And especially Ronaldinho was a guy that I wanted to mimic my game after, not just the way he played it with his feet, but the way, like his demeanor, the way he smiled, and the way he just was
The
having fun.
swagger.
Love, yeah, exactly. And so I would study those videos, those Joga Bonito videos, and I would learn basically every trick that I saw. And some of these tricks were hard. So it took
Yeah.
me, years to master, but I would go out, juggle, dribble, and I wanted to look like those players. And so that actually ended up being, I think, a huge reason why I was able to make it in MLS for as long as I have, because that developed kind of everyone in the MLS locker room has some type of superpower, whether it's speed, strength, skills. It could be, finishing ability, like scoring goals. And I developed that superpower because of those videos, and that's what caused me to get out there, hours, multiple times a week, away from my team practices, just like having fun with the ball. So that's where it came from, was that South American approach to the game that I fell in love with, and then that's what eventually caused me to learn Spanish in 2019, because that was like the full circle moment where I'm like, wait, this is the game that I fell in love with. Now there's an Argentinian coach in front of me, and he's bringing in a lot of South American players. Now I'm like living the professional version of like that approach to the game. And then that's why I was so inspired to learn Spanish as quickly as I did.
That's impressive. I think that kind of ties us into like our next question, like you're passionate about having that fun and that flair, but you've been playing for about 11 years now. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct.
Yeah. So you've been playing pro for about 11 years. How have you maintained your passion over the years and been able to stay focused? Because we know the mental toll it takes to play at an elite level and to maintain that fun when you're getting paid for it. But I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, I think it's important to get new perspectives even while you're a professional soccer player. And so I think going to elementary schools and running an assembly where I'm sharing my love for the game, I think was important. I think going to a U10 soccer practice and coaching a team, and sharing some of the different exercises that I did that helped me become a pro, seeing the kids at that level and with the dreams that they have is inspiring, because it reminds you of when you were at that age. And then now you realize, wait, okay, these kids are looking at me a certain way because I achieved what they want to achieve. It gives you that perspective. And once you remove yourself from that locker room bubble, because at the end of the day, everyone in the locker room achieved the goal of becoming a major league soccer player. And so sometimes you could become numb to it, and you could forget how amazing of an opportunity it is, or how fun it is to be able to represent like the Earthquakes organization or whichever team you're playing for. So I think constantly getting out of my comfort zone and seeking new perspectives gave me like a wider scope on what I was actually doing in live time. And I think that provided me with that fresh air, and that allowed me to stay positive and find different ways to have fun even through some of the most difficult moments in my career. Because that's I think where a lot of times guys can shut down, is if they get in a difficult locker room, or a losing team, and that that environment can become so negative that if you don't have fresh perspectives, it can break you, and then you can start making excuses, blaming your
Yeah.
teammates, blaming the coaches, and then that's where you can get bounced out of the league pretty quickly. So I think, to
Yeah.
answer your question, just getting different perspectives and stepping outside your comfort zone and getting out of that professional soccer bubble is important in order to keep things fun and realize how amazing it is to get paid for the game that you love.
Yeah, I love it. It's like that notion of really being rooted to the love of the game and the essence of the game. And I think when you are connected to kids who are playing the game because it's just sheer love and passion for the sport and you're able to give back, it really does give you perspective of like, oh my gosh, I play professional soccer on the Earthquakes. Like, this is crazy. I am living these kids' dreams. And yeah, and also just kind of take some of the pressure off, like you mentioned. But I love the way that you're giving back to the community. We mentioned in the intro in 2017, you actually won that MLS Humanitarian of the Year award, particularly around a program that you co-launched with one of your teammates called Get Earthquakes Fit. Can you talk to us a little bit about what that program was, and what you guys were able to achieve through the program?
Yeah, so the Get Earthquakes Fit program was a program that me and Shay Salinas spearheaded for a number of years, and the league ended up recognizing me for it, which I really appreciate. But basically, we wanted to inspire kids across the Bay Area to drink more water, eat their fruits and vegetables, and to stay active. So we came up with a program where a member of the Earthquakes front office would go to a school, have an assembly, explain to the kids what the program is and how we want them to stay active, and if they do a great job with the program, and over a period of a couple months, they complete it, then a San Jose Earthquakes player will show up and congratulate them on completing the program and do an assembly to encourage them to keep that lifestyle moving forward. And so that's what, we went to countless schools. Sometimes the audience was 50 elementary school kids. Sometimes it was 200 elementary school kids. And we would show up, basically just tell them to fall in love with whether it's soccer or basketball or freeze tag, whatever it happens to be, fall in love with some type of activity and do it for at least 30 minutes to an hour every day, because that's what's going to keep your heart healthy and your mind happy. And so that was a powerful initiative that I'm really grateful to have been a part of.
That's beautiful. It's always so fun to go talk to young kids about what they're passionate about and help give back, because I mean, the more you give, the more you get in return. But I think all of us, I know Bree and I have gone through this, like post athlete career. When you think about that next chapter of your career after you end up hanging up the cleats, what gets you the most fired up? Like, what do you envision your legacy in soccer and beyond to be?
Yeah, it's a good question. That's something that after 11 years, inevitably you start to think about. I've had the good fortune to have made it in Major League Soccer for as long as I have. But I would say once you reach your mid to late 20s, you start thinking about, okay, well, what might be next? And for me, I've given up. I've given up a lot. I gave up like my senior year of high school, and then I gave up my basically my entire college experience. And then now that I'm 29, I've been playing professional soccer since I was 18. I've missed out on a lot of my friends were moving to major cities and being early, like a post college grad in a major city for the first time, and then changing cities and trying out a different different energy. Like that whole experience I've missed out on. And so for me, like when I'm done, I think I'm definitely gonna miss soccer in some capacity, but I'm also excited to catch up with like this different walk of life that I've missed out on. Like I've got a lot of friends in a lot of different industries that are excited about where they're at in their careers, and that to me is inspiring. And so I don't know exactly how I would go about the first step of the next chapter, whether it's coaching in MLS or coaching somewhere in a different country, whatever it happens to be, or if I want to step into a tech sales job or medical sales, whatever happens, VC. I mean, you name it. There's countless opportunities, and I think it's been inspiring for me to stay in touch with those friends over those years, because I've seen how they've grown, just like how I grew in my career, they've grown in theirs. And so I would say I don't know exactly what I'm going to do, but I'm excited to start on a new challenge. There's no doubt about that.
100%. Well, whenever that moment comes for you, I'm so excited to see how you really lean into that next play and all the things you're going to accomplish and the people you're going to inspire and the ways you're going to give back, because that's just who you are. So yeah, excited to be your friend in that journey and see what you continue to do. So to finish off every episode, we'd love to hear from you any words of advice you have for listeners looking to use their talents and passions to make the world a better place.
Yeah, for me, I think the most important thing is to fall in love with some type of activity. Like I said, my dad um, shared his love for soccer at an early age, and I fell in love with it. And then when I was in 7th or 8th grade, watching those Joga Bonito advertisements and seeing the Brazilians approach to that game, I fell in love with that approach to that game, which ended up deepening my love for soccer. And then full circle in 2019, when we had an Argentinian coach and a full-time translator, I fell in love with the language of Spanish and the Latino culture of how they approach soccer and how passionate they are about just about everything. And I think when you organically fall in love with something, whether it's learning Spanish or learning how to play soccer or learning how to do a back heel or a juggling trick, I think people notice. People feel that true passion that you have for it, and that is contagious. Just like what my dad did for me, and that's why me and my two brothers went professional. Is because my dad had a true love for something, and then organically it was transmitted to us. I think when you try to manufacture something, people notice. So if you want to use your passions for good, I would recommend to authentically fall in love with whatever it is that you're passionate about, and people will take notice, and it will inspire them to pursue their own passions as well.
Love it.
I love that. That hits the nail on the head. And I think it comes to mind too, specifically because as adults, a lot of times we lose a passion for something because we get into like a mundane rhythm of things. And as kids, it's easy to find things you're passionate about because everything's new and exciting. But as adults, it's so much harder to lean into that passion and that love for something again, because whether you feel like it's childish to get excited about something, but I love to see people that like you, like Bree, like me, that are like actually passionate about like something, anything, like, because it's a game changer.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you can learn a lot from paying attention to how kids interact with each other and how kids interact with different activities, because you can see the passion, the excitement when they're playing tetherball on the playground for the first time. And I think staying in touch with that, like your inner child, regardless of how old you are, is important to continue to develop new passions.
I love that.
Well, I think that brings us to our lightning round. This is our fun one. Pew, pew, pew. And these are just a few quick questions, and you have about 30 seconds to answer each. And so for our first question, we'll start off with, who's the toughest competition you've faced on the field?
Toughest competition, I would say, was probably Schweinsteiger when we played against Manchester United a couple of years ago.
Nice. Okay. Is he just a total beast? Just like,
yeah,
okay, what can we do?
Yeah, he's a beast, like German World Cup winner. It was fun lining up against him.
That's tough. Yeah, for sure. Next question. Who is the biggest trash talker in the MLS or that you've played on a global scale?
I would say Chris Wondolowski, one of my teammates for, I think it ended up being 9 or 10 years. He was definitely the biggest trash talker, whether it was the opponents, his own teammates, the referees, or whatever. Everyone could hear it at any point. And I think it was important. He had such energy that it would raise everyone's awareness and competition. And he was constantly raising everyone else's level through that, which was fun to be a part of.
That's awesome.
Did you kind of absorb some of that trash talkery and take it into your own game?
Absolutely. When I walked in the locker room at 18, I was definitely a target. There was a big target on my back, and I think those years of proving myself and earning my stripes definitely sharpened the mind and allowed me to be ready for when a curveball gets thrown at me.
Love that. All right, next question. Which country has the best soccer?
Hot take.
I was just in Buenos Aires in December, and that was my first time going there, and I had the opportunity to watch Boca Juniors play, and I actually saw Vélez win the league in their last game of the season.
Yeah.
And the passion that country has for the sport is something I've never seen before. So I'm gonna go with Argentina.
Wow. That leads into my next question, which is which fans are the rowdiest?
Yeah, I would go the Argentinian fans or the Greek fans. The
Greek
Eastern
fans.
Eastern European soccer is different. I'm sure you guys have seen the videos of like Panathinaikos basketball as well. Like
yeah.
Oh yeah.
Insane with like the flamethrowers and
throwing bottles on the court, fire.
Yeah, the pyros, the chants. Yeah, so that's deeply embedded in soccer culture as well. So I would say those
Fun.
Eastern Europeans can get rowdy.
Man, I can't imagine. My friend played for the Olympiacos in Greece,
Yeah.
and she had stories of like people like spitting on them, and they having hockey glass around the basketball courts, and people were chucking their beer cans and things on fire, and they had to get escorted.
Yeah. Olympiacos, Panathinaikos, Ike, all those PAOK too. All those the top teams in Greece. They have a crazy environment. It's fun to watch.
Oh, crazy. Final question. If you could get dinner with anyone in history, past, present, future, who would it be and why?
I mentioned him earlier, 100% Ronaldinho. I think he speaks Spanish now, so it'd be fun to be able to organically communicate with him too. But he inspired me so much, and he doesn't know it, but he's a huge reason why I made it as a professional soccer player in Major League Soccer. So I'd love to connect with him on his love for the game and how he fell in love with it and how he was able to, basically the same questions you guys were asking me, I would like to ask him just to get in touch with like his approach to it, because his approach is the approach that I fell in love with.
That's so cool. I feel like you can make it happen. I feel like you're like one connection away from let's make it happen.
I think so too. We'll see.
That's amazing. Well, Tommy, thank you so much for being on the podcast. You really have such an awesome story, and you're an incredible human, and you really embody what it means to be more than an athlete and use your platform to give back. So yeah, really grateful to have you on the show. For all of our listeners out there, we're going to link Tommy's social media profiles and different resources to the show notes so you can follow along his journey and stay involved in all that he has going on. But yeah, thank you again for being on the show. It's really cool.
Yeah, thanks for having me. And hopefully I'll see you guys at NBA All-Star Weekend.
Let's go. Say less.
Yeah.